Welcome everybody to another episode of Arthritic Bourbon Bikers, and we have a new thumbnail.
Yeah.
We were out yesterday and we shot some video of, or not video, but a photo while we were out of some items, put it together, made a new thumbnail, have that uploaded now. The podcast is now distributed on 7 different podcast networks out there, I guess. We're on Google and Apple now, which is great. Anchor FM, if you're doing podcasts and you have interest in putting one out there, Anchor has made the process really easy. And they don't sponsor this, but it has been nice to be able to use Anchor because it's really pretty straightforward as a platform. So they're really doing some neat stuff out there. So today we wanted to talk about training.
Bad word.
Never a great word, but a word you may want to consider if you're getting ready to take a tour. One of the things we talked about, now we did some riding this week. You did a couple days in a row, and I did a couple of days this week in general. But we got out on the bikes a little bit. Now today, in all fairness, in case anyone hears thunder and lightning, it is kind of nasty out. Like there was a storm last night. It was rumbly and grumbly and making all kinds of noise. It's raining out there now, so if you hear thunder and so forth in the background, that might be why. But one of the things that I think that is most difficult about bicycle touring in general is that a lot of people can decide they want to do this, but then they go out, they get on the bike, they take off, and they've not really put in any time learning or training, getting their body prepared for really long distance bicycle touring.
Yeah.
So I know that you and I both, we rode bicycles as kids, and I don't know how many miles we rode because back then when you're a kid, you never track that kind of stuff, of course, and you can ride all day on your bicycle and not think anything about it. But, as you get older and as you've been away from bikes for a while and you decide you're going to get back in the bicycle seat, we're talking about some days that can be, you can be in that saddle for 5-6 hours.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. 12-year-old joints are different than 40-something-year-old joints. And a young person can do it all day long.
I think we've learned some things by being out there and just doing it. I know I certainly have tried to do a lot of reading where I could find stuff. That's where I think that this is a good topic to talk about, because I don't know if people really know how do I go about training. So what do you think, like what historically, talk a little bit about how you began to ride and get yourself acclimated to touring.
Yeah. Most of the stuff early on was riding the campus in college, and then you don't need to do much. You just have a way to strap on your backpack to something, But as I finished all that nonsense up and I started looking for something to do for enjoyment and fitness, I knew I would ride a little bit longer. And back then it seemed like I had a real hiatus from bicycling. And so by the time I started, it was like six miles was a landmark for me. And, you'd be sore in a couple different places sometimes. It'd be maybe the joints you haven't used. It'd be the caboose, certainly is it. And then you realize you're out of breath, too. And so I kind of think of three sort of things I struggle with. It's
cardiovascular, being able to keep your breath, keep your body moving with adequate oxygen. Really, joint in general.
Yeah, knees.
And then it's really the butt then. I mean, for touring, cycle touring, it's really the butt. And I think this is really one of those things that differentiates racing, like road bike racing to bike touring. Because the guys who get on and do cycle racing, I'm not saying they don't do long events. Some of them do 100-mile days, no doubt about that. But their training periods tend to be more aerobic, I guess.
Yeah.
A lot of times they're shorter. Sometimes they're more sprints. Sometimes they're 1 or 2 hour rides, like a couple hour ride, because they're putting in. They're going much faster. Most of these guys are. I'm generalizing and kind of categorizing, but they're young, they're lean, and they're on really lightweight, thin, hard tired bikes. Oftentimes on pavement, not always in our area, but it's just a different style of biking. Yep. And theirs is very much more heavily on the cardio side of things, I would say.
Yeah.
And, muscle.
Speed oriented.
Yeah. But in touring, it's all about time in the saddle. to me anyway. You can go a really long distance if you can spend hours sitting in that saddle.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think when I think about touring, those are the things that I learned was I had to get over this kind of mental hurdle of, I think, of just getting on the bike and wanting to go hard. I mean, that's fun sometimes, but when you are looking at many miles ahead of you, you have to change your perspective to be more of a, I guess, more of the tortoise and the hare. Slow and steady. You've got to be able to put the time in. So I think when it comes to training, that's a good perspective to keep in your mind. Yeah. I know that when I first get on the bike in the mornings, that the first thing I want to do is just really kind of go at it a little bit. But some recent folks that I've read, followed, talked to, and so forth, really talk about pacing yourself is important.
Yeah.
And I think when you begin to talk about training, that's something that the very foundation of when you're thinking about this, you need to think about, okay, what is the objective with the touring? It's usually miles, distance, and time on the bike.
Yeah. Well, and, you have to, like we talked about, you do have to warm up. And if you're doing that more slowly, you're going to spend most of the day doing it. You do start in the morning. I'm a morning person. I wake up early, my mind gets going, but my body lags a little bit. And so you have to sort of be real cautious. You can't just, as you say, jump out, and unless you're, in your 20s, sometimes that works for a little while. But you're going to start popping the Advil right into that.
Right. There's a reason that, arthritic is in the beginning of this. Not that we're, as we've said, not that either of us are really truly diagnosed with arthritis, but I think it goes to the thought of that you've got to think about those aches and pains and how to ease into it in the mornings.
Prevent them a little bit.
Yeah, prevent them and prevent injury and really, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. So we went on a bike ride yesterday. I think I said at least on my calculation, it was 37 miles, something like that. We kind of sort of met almost kind of halfway. We kind of met halfway on the ride, but and we're kind of suffering today a little bit. You can hear, the sexy raspy voice of Jerry today, but the trail was real dusty, and this time of year in Missouri, ragweed is like at an all-time high. We're hopefully on the downtrend. August is its peak usually. September, though, it's still in full force, and it was dusty, it was dirty, it was allergies, and so all of these things contribute to your ability to sort of perform each day.
Consecutive days, that's the key.
Yeah. So you did some riding on Friday also. You did a late kind of a nighttime ride sort of.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that. Just I want people to kind of have a perspective of some guys in our late 40s now.
Yep.
We're on the back half of the 40s, let's just say, and how that is, a guy doing a couple days in a row, and with that, like kind of, you talked a little bit yesterday about how you were feeling, and that's an important thing to take into consideration.
Yeah. Now, some of the rides I do, like after a day of work or whatever, I'll hop on the trail and go, and it might be 20 miles, might be 40 miles. And I might go faster or slower. And that day I sort of slowed down. I stopped, had something to eat. And the local university's having a big game the day after. And so the drum corps is all downtown. So I thought I'll hang around, listen to this. So I was out pretty late. I didn't roll in home until 11 p.m. with my lights and all kinds of stuff. But the total sum of that was several hours of riding on and off. So knees, quads, everything, got a little bit of a workout. And then I didn't sleep well. Got up early.
Right.
My wife was going out of town, so I got up early, kind of helped her get her stuff ready.
Now that night ride you did was 40 miles?
Yeah.
41? Something like that?
Mm-hmm. And then got up and kind of got Brenda going, and then we rode.
Right.
And I thought, there's not been a lot of hours between my last ride. Yeah. And I really could feel it that morning. And I had maybe a little more stuff on the bike. Not a ton, but it was really a chore. It just felt like I was going through some sand. And I knew that the trail was probably in even better shape by the time we got down it, because it was a little more dry. And I really felt like I had the monkey on my back a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that we've talked a little bit about you're not used to really, like when you ride or train, a lot of your training is in the afternoons because, like most people out there, we have jobs and things that we do and we're not retired or whatever. And I know some people are, but for us, a lot of times that riding has to happen, 3 o'clock or after, let's just say in general, in the afternoon. So if you're training, you need to take into consideration things like what's it like when I ride in the morning versus what's it like when I ride in the afternoon. And that's everything from rest, number one, just in general, whether it be sleep or just resting your joints or whatever. That's to if you take any medications, like how does that fluctuate throughout the day? I mean, in fairness for them, you're a physician, so you know kind of some of the possibilities of drug interactions or the way drugs, I mean, not interactions, but more like how they can, cycle depending on your day or things
or
like
you've
that.
had food.
Nutrition, obviously, like have you had breakfast? What kind of things did you eat for breakfast even can make a difference, at least for me, I've noticed, the types of food. So you need to think about all these things when you're training. And you need some variety because on cycle touring trips that we do and prepare for, it's usually get up and ride in the morning. I mean, on the average, like even if you're at a place like, let's talk about it, when we were in Kentucky and we were doing that bourbon tour, Bourbon Country Burn, whatever it was called, the name they give it. Even though that was one centralized camping location and then multiple days where it was kind of a hub and spoke style setup where you camped in one location, you left your stuff set up, but you got on the bike and rode out and then rode back. It was kind of, they had loops kind of set up. Even if you're doing a situation like that and you don't have to pack up your stuff, they always start in the mornings. And I remember one morning where it was foggy and cool. In fact, the race, the start of that day was delayed because of the fog and because of safety, which was a good call. But also, I think we talked about then how you get up in the morning, it's cold, your bike's cold even, like you get in that saddle's cold. It might even be damp depending on whether you covered
You can
your
almost
seat.
hear it ask you, what are you doing right now?
Exactly.
Bike's like, wait a minute, you going to sit on me all day? Give me a second.
So you need to think about the varieties of things that could be going on. Probably on an average day, depending on the tour we would do, we would get up and pack up our stuff. And some days that's a tent. Some days that's, just getting your stuff together. If you stayed in a hotel and you're a credit card tour day or whatever, you got to get up and pack your stuff. So you've got an hour or so, or maybe longer to, eat some breakfast, drink some coffee. Get some caffeine flowing through the system. Those kind of things before you ever get on the bike. And on the videos that I made of that particular Kentucky ride, I remember one morning I have some video shots of you laying on the ground, stretching. And just like, I
hope this doesn't break.
just trying to loosen up for the morning, things like that. And so I guess the point is that if you're trying to train or prepare for these things, you need to consider that and maybe think about varying your training a little bit. Don't always make it all afternoon rides. Get up on a Saturday and try to leave early when it's cold out or cool out, when it's going to warm up. I mean, we had that a little bit yesterday. It was 64 degrees or something like that when I left the house yesterday and we started riding. And we had on some pullovers and stuff to stay warm a little bit. And then as the day went on, it really did start to clear off. The sun came out, it warmed up to probably around 80. So we were able to strip off some clothing. And
this time of year is significant for that here in Missouri. You'll have a wide range of temperatures in the same day.
It can be 55 degrees in the morning and it can be 92 in the afternoon. So you really need to have layers and the ability to adjust. And so just think about all these things when you're training. When you're trying to prepare, you need to consider the variables, I guess, a little bit.
Something just occurred to me as we were talking about that bourbon ride and any other ride. When I did the summer too, if you're not sleeping in the conditions you're used to, i.e. a tiny little sleeping pad on an uneven or a hard surface, you're going to be slower to rouse in the morning. And I'm not sure you can train around that, except unless you really want to do it and alter the way you sleep for a week or two before you take a long ride. That's a possibility. I did not do that ever in the past, but
your ability to recover and rest when you're out there on the tour is really different because you're sleeping in weird locations. You might be around a whole bunch of people and maybe they make noise, or maybe they, you're just not going to sleep as well. You're not going to rest as well.
Yep.
Not to mention food, nutrition. On some of those rides, particularly the one in Kentucky, every evening there was some bourbon involved. That was the point of the ride, was bourbon tours and samples and all kinds of things. And so you're introducing all kinds of variables into nutrition on top of just maybe you're eating different foods. But you got to think about all those things when you're riding. And if you're going to be self-sustained, which I know some people are, but a lot of people stop and grab food and things like that. So I guess when it comes to training, the things that have worked best for me has been to start small, but maybe think about more frequent as you increase your frequency over time. So when you got me, convinced me to give this a try, you got the bike, just got a basic rack on the bike and didn't really put anything on it, just going with a naked bike basically, and ride about 4 or 5 miles and kind of get into that groove a little bit. And then it began to extend it to like 9 miles. Was I think my next kind of thing. And then after that, it was 14 or 15 miles. Then it was 20, 25 miles. And I think for me personally, after 25 miles, things kind of change. I can't explain that except to say that for me, after 25 miles, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of difference outside of multiple days in a row. Then. So to go out and do a 25-mile ride, we did 36 yesterday. I think I probably could have kept going. I probably could have done 50 yesterday. But I think what it comes to then is endurance a little bit. Like how many consecutive days could I spend in that saddle? How many consecutive days would the muscles, the joints, the IT band, the tendons, how would they feel after that? So you have to think about not only distance, but also frequency, because it is a repetitive motion.
Yeah, I noticed that. I've done a couple where it tends to be after 2, usually 3 days, there's kind of a rest day built in. But some of these rides that are organized and they're right across South Dakota, right across Wyoming, whatever they're doing, people, come to that event and they say, okay, this is my week off. I've scheduled this week. We got to get this done. And so they'll take the whole thing. And so there's really no rest day. There might be, most of those are 60, 70 plus days. And some of them have an option most days where if you really want to, you can ride a century that day, every day. There are some folks I met that were doing that. Most of the time it's 60 or 70 or so. And that's a lot every day. Throw in some hills, we talked about throwing that in. We're sort of in a flat part of the country here, so it's hard to train with hills. You've got to really seek them out. So that's something else to think about too. So if you're doing consecutive days on a terrain that's different, you have a long week.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you're exactly right. Most of these tours, people have a certain amount of time. The organized tours, I guess I should say, they have a block of time, and so there might be the option for taking a shorter route one day or whatever, but there really aren't a lot of rest days normally. So you got to think about those things. I think the hardest part about cycle touring and training is making or finding the time.
Yeah, that's true.
Cycling is time consuming. Touring takes time. It's if you're 10 miles an hour and you want to go 50 miles, that's 5 hours.
Yeah. Math is simple.
Right? And not everybody can find or is willing to carve out 5 hours to ride each day or every other day or, things like that. It's hard. It's hard to carve that out. And so I think for training purposes, what I usually try to do is I figure if I can get in 2 to 3 times a week, that's probably about as good as it's going to get.
Yeah. It sometimes works for me is I have those weeks where I can do that. Pardon me. several days of whether it's 20 or 40 miles, whatever it happens to be. But then on a Saturday or Sunday, if the weather's nice, I'll try to put in a real long ride.
Yeah.
And that's what, a lot of people training for long running races do too, and I'm certainly not a runner, but my wife has done some, and I've watched her kind of go through that. And if you can do that, because on these tours, whether you're self-supported, doing it at your own pace, or something that's organized, there are going to be some long days. You just have to, if you're getting from point A to point B, at some point, there's going to be a long stretch.
Yeah.
So,
or there's going to be days where the terrain's just different. I know when we were on the Natchez, I remember, there were days where it seemed like there's a lot more hills, just more climbing. I'm sure you saw that in South Dakota.
Yeah.
Just days where you're doing more climbing. A recent video by Darwin. Well, it's not recent; it's an old video, but I was watching it recently about Darwin on the trail when he was biking the Blue Ridge Parkway. He talked about one day where they only did like 17 or 20 miles because it was all climbing.
Yeah.
And so you're gonna have miserable days like that. I think you have to be willing to maybe change your expectations. Or change your plan.
Yeah.
Or then sometimes you don't have that option. Like when we were on the Natchez, we had days where we would cycle and we had to get to the next campground because there was no place else to stay. The thing about the Natchez that was really surprised me was how little there is along that trail, that highway.
Yeah.
The Trace's got great, beautiful blacktop, but there's not much along it.
Yeah, if you're hungry, you're committed to go somewhere.
Yeah, we would duck off the trail and to go find food at some places. And it might be a 2 or 3 mile out of the way path.
Yeah.
To get to food. And so
to find out they're not open.
To find out they're closed. Some of these towns, Google's not always 100% reliable with when places are open. So you just have to keep that in mind when you're training, is that terrain can affect things and you need to vary it. Like you said, we live in an area where the Katy Trail is almost completely flat. There's a moderate grades, but I mean, moderate's probably even over, sort of not really the case. It is flat. It's a rail trail, so we have to intentionally try to find places with some hills to be able to put in at least some time, but we just don't have that much here for that.
Yeah.
So in training, I think you need to vary your days. I think you need to vary the terrain if you can. And then I think another big aspect of that for me has always just been time in the saddle. That's what I ever tell everybody. It's like you need saddle time.
Yeah.
I just need to sit in the damn seat.
Yeah.
For extended periods of time to get the butt in shape. And now that brings up a completely different topic, which we're going to talk about in a podcast at some point, is saddles.
Yeah.
But saddles are like anchors. I talk about sailors and anchors all the time. It's a huge debate. Very passionate people about what they believe is the best saddle and what works for them. Yeah. But the realities of it are, it makes no difference what saddle you have in general if you don't put time in it.
Right. Yeah.
Because your butt is going to be sore. You spend that amount of time, your butt's going to be sore.
Well, there are actually a couple of things to talk about there too. Your pelvis gets sort of sore. Just because the bones that are there, they sort of get a little, just a little bit of pressure. Sometimes I'll have just sort of tailbone pain for several days or something. I find sitting in a chair, if my bike wasn't adjusted right or whatever, or maybe I'd mess with the saddle. But also, the skin, the friction, you've got to also account for that. So, get some chamois cream, some chamois butter. So you've got that, and you've also got to worry about just getting your body getting used to supporting your weight on that particular seat. It's different.
And there's really just no substitute for time. It's like everything, whether it's repetitive movements of any kind can develop, problems with the skin in general, whether it be saddle sores. Everybody's heard the terms saddle sore, or you have saddle sores. You can actually get open wounds.
Yeah.
So you need to take these things very seriously. And these are things that can absolutely ruin your tour.
Yeah.
Your enjoyment. And almost all of us, we're doing this for enjoyment. This is not
right.
It's not a sport. Yeah. I mean, it is a sport, but we're not in it for the competition.
Yeah.
We're in it for seeing the countryside in different ways, in exploring small communities, meeting new people.
Yeah.
And
the
just
benefit of exercise.
the exercise, yes, the time out and the fresh air, the allergies.
Right.
So, you know, you don't want to ruin your time by having poor preparation. And so one of those ways is to spend time, learn what kind of if you wear bike shorts, or you have, even if they're not like traditional bike shorts, but you have specific types of shorts that you wear. You talked about this yesterday.
Yeah. Yes. Some were just tighter in places you didn't think they would. Wait a minute.
Right. So you need to
seemed right.
practice with your gear.
Yeah.
Just get some time, you know. And I think as we talk about training, that's important. You're gonna refine your gear over time. I mean, we've been doing this for a couple of years. We're still changing things up. But I have things routines that work for me that I found. Like I have particular types of shorts that I like to wear. I have a couple of pairs of them. And let's be honest, you probably don't need more than a couple if you're going on a tour. You're not going to bring all your luggage. This isn't like taking a vacation. Even when we take vacations now, we minimize that even a little bit. But this is not like traveling on an airplane. This is pretty minimalistic. You only have so much gear you can put on this bike, and so you need to find some clothing that really works for you. You need to find gear and refine that down so that you feel comfortable with it. That you can spend a week or longer, depending on your tour, but you can spend a week with what you've got. The only way you're going to figure that out is put time in it.
Yeah.
Wear it.
If you do take group tours, watch everyone else too. Talk about the routine, watch them, and you'll chuckle. But then, you know, you'll meet them several times over the course of a few days, and you'll figure out exactly why they're doing this. It's pretty funny. And then you can have some great conversations with people, and they'll tell you why they do this or that. It might even be a little superstition to it. A little bit of baseball player in everybody. They're like, oh, no, last time I didn't do this. I bonked out at mile 40.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. There's a ton of ritual. It's a real interesting group. It's a fantastic group of people. Most everybody that I've interacted, that we've been around, they're friendly, they're helpful, they're willing to do whatever. People will stop and offer to help you if you're having a problem. I know we've offered to help people when they've had problems, you know, if they've got a flat or need a tool. You know, you're going to find those kind of people all over in the cycling community in general. But you can learn a lot by watching other people. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to start this podcast, was because we talked about, we got into this, we didn't know diddly, really. We didn't know anything. We went out there looking for information. We found some information, but we've learned some things along the way, and we wanted to share that. So when it talks about training, that's why we're here talking about it. What's worked for us has been sort of doing some longer rides, put some time in, but then comes the time where you actually have to just go.
Yeah.
Sailors talk about it all the time. Cast off the lines.
Yeah.
You can never have the perfect setup. The only way you're going to learn is by getting out there and experiencing it.
Yeah. And I think you're going to have to engineer a couple anxiety-provoking situations to realize that, okay, this is going to be okay. And I've been caught in some storms, and without this or that, or, you know, whatever, something breaks, and I thought, I had that in my bag. What happened? It's not there, you know. But you have to experience those and realize you're going to make it back.
Right.
and you know, now realize I say these things and I'm not cycling in bear country or anything like that either. But, you know, there's precautions to be taken, but you have to sort of allow yourself to be in an uncomfortable, to some degree, uncomfortable situation, and then you'll come to enjoy it. You get back and you think, well, that was kind of fun, you know.
Well, and that's part of the experience.
Yeah.
I mean, part of why we do this, there's the cardio and there's the countryside and all these things, but really it's about the experiences. And you're going to have those things where you're going to have days where you're like, I don't know if my body's going to hold up today.
Yeah.
But what you learn about yourself when you go through all these things, a recent article I shared with you was the guy writes a really great couple paragraphs, and he talks about how, you know, there was toil and strife and they cried and all this stuff. It was a really great write-up, and it made both of us kind of chuckle, because you've been through those things where you're like, I don't know if my joints are going to hold up, or I've got some significant pain here. And it's not to say that you shouldn't stop, but it's amazing how much you truly can push the body.
Oh yeah, perseverance.
I mean, we in the grand scheme, we're actually, most of us are pretty. We give up too soon, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
We don't push ourselves to the point that we can, and it's not to say that you want to injure yourself or do something that could lead to some hospital trips or negligence or whatever. But at the same time, we give up pretty quickly. Most
put
of
the
us.
bar a little higher each day.
Yeah, so you can push your body a lot farther than you ever believed you could, and
well, it's probably the mind more than the body.
yes,
I think it's more this. We sort of get accustomed to letting off on our life's accelerator, and sometimes that's what you need. But
yeah,
sometimes it's this is going to be okay.
yeah. So kind of the third major area that you kind of brought up was nutrition, food.
Yeah.
So I could probably do an entire podcast talking about this because I've put myself through some crazy nutritional stuff before and continue to sometimes. I have, for one thing, we've both over the years we've gone through some fairly significant weight loss. I'd say just in general.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone from 250 to 185 since 2012. Cycling was involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm back now to probably about 195. That's about where I tend to that's where I sort of ride in weight. But the point is that I've tried the traditional method of just calorie restriction with exercise, burn more than you eat. I've done low carb. I've done full-blown ketosis and cycled in that. And I learned a ton of things about how that functions, both in research and practical implementation for me. And so if anybody ever wants to know more about that, happy to talk about it. If you're thinking about true ketosis cycling, I'll give you the secret. It all comes down to heart rate, or it did for me anyway. I can only speak to my own experience. But the difficulties are great in that finding food or taking food, packing foods that you can stay within that realm of a ketogenic diet is really difficult because out there on the road, there are just not as many options available to you, and it's harder to pack foods that are high in fat, low in carbohydrate. I can't easily throw a ribeye, in my
on the trunk bag,
my trunk bag and whip that baby out. Yes, there are options. Yes, there are things, but it's
difficult.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
And so that's why trying it was great, but in practicality, I tend to leave that for tours because not only that, like if you go on organized tours, most of the foods prepared are going to be more traditional cycling, higher carbohydrate type things. So you might be on a cycling tour, and if it's organized in the evening, might be pasta. And that's it.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you
pasta
don't eat
and beer
and pasta, which are two extremely high carbohydrate items. And so you might have to make some sacrifices on dietary wise. So you need to think about that. But nutrition is a huge part. And we talked about this yesterday a little bit. Food timing.
Yeah. And you'll learn about your own needs. That's the thing that I sort of discovered. You think, okay, I'm feeling like I'm about to hit the wall. And then that's, 30 minutes ago is when I should have eaten it. When that's the case for me. But that's the thing. You have to sort of figure that out for yourself.
The hardest part, too, is to consider when you're biking how many calories you're burning, and just in general in an hour. Yeah. So you have to think about that. And my rough estimate for me, in what I think anyway, and you never know this exactly, but you'll kind of learn this over time, is that my body tends to burn about 500 calories an hour, just on average. 350 to 500, somewhere in there. It all depends. So if you're going to keep up with that, you really have to eat a fair amount of food.
You got to fuel it,
and to fuel the body. But at the same time, oftentimes we don't feel like eating. Like you're riding along and you're just like, oh, I don't want to put food in right now. It doesn't even sound good sometimes, depending on the weather or temperature.
Yeah.
And then of course it's fluids.
Oh yeah.
So, you have to drink water or some kind of a liquid. I know that for us, like, it was funny yesterday, you were, we kind of were coordinating, or we didn't really know we were coordinating, but we sort of coordinated, and you were at the coffee place with your mug there.
Yeah.
Loading up on coffee. And you were laughing that, coffee's best out of a feed bag.
Yeah.
Your mug in the feed bag. And I shot a picture back to you, and I had my coffee mug in a feed bag too. And so, oftentimes we might start that morning out with the morning coffee, but it might be on the bike.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your first liquid of the day. But not only is it the liquid, it's a caffeine shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
But that's like the thing, man, I have to start the day like that.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that is the thing that it's like the routine. It's another one of those routines we talk about is if you drink coffee, don't be afraid to throw it in there and put it on your bike and take it with you.
Yeah.
It's another liquid source.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to mention something too, because I don't want folks to get the wrong idea about at least me and my objectives. I understand that some of the things I do or choose to do when I'm bicycling are not evidence-based, right? Not the best idea, but it's something we're going to enjoy. So you say, okay, I'm doing this not because it's my job, not because I'm training for the Tour de France or anything, but because this is what I want to spend my Saturday doing. And by God, I'm going to have my coffee. And if I wrap up at the end of this, I'm gonna wind up at the distillery in Hermit, and I might have a big burger and a bourbon. And that's it. I'm not going to apologize, but that's what I've chosen to do. So,
right, yeah,
you have to sort of realize too, you're training, but you got to enjoy it. You got to be doing something you want to do, or you're not going to do it next Saturday.
Absolutely. 100% agree. This is all about the enjoyment factor. It's about experiences, as we said. So if it means in the middle of your tour, you decide to cut it short because you want to go to a winery and eat bread and cheese and drink a bottle of wine, then cut it short. It's about enjoying it. It's about, I think that's the other thing when we talk about nutrition and food, just in general. Sometimes you want to stop and eat the crazy thing. And because it's the thing right there. If you're on Ragbri and pie is the thing in Iowa, you're going to eat some pie, man. And, if you're driving through or biking through the country and there's a place that makes fried pies, like you found a place this week, you're going to get the fried pie, man, and check it out. That's part of the experience. Yeah. It's part of sort of enjoying life. And so that's why I understand the dietary needs and the nutrition needs, and you want to be healthy, and maybe you're in this for exercise or the healthy lifestyle of it. Mm-hmm. But don't be afraid to cut yourself some slack.
Sure. Yeah.
And live life a little bit too. I'm certainly happy with, the fact that I'm not as heavy as I was. I feel better for sure. I do tend to lead a lower carb lifestyle, but I'm not gonna sacrifice that cheeseburger if I need some food.
Yeah. Well, and look back, rewind a few years, more like just a couple for me, but you've been doing some of this for a little longer. The fitness and the nutrition changes. And the bottom line is every incremental step forward toward a healthier person is good. And so, I'm not where I need to be, and I'm making some choices that aren't always designed for the best performance on the bicycle, but I'm a heck of a lot better off than I was 2 years ago.
Well, I think we should, you can talk about health, but we should never forget about mental health.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I mean, when you're getting that exercise and you're just having the enjoyment of being out there, and you're just, fresh air and all those things. Yeah, there's the allergies and all the potential things that can cause you some headaches, but just the mental health aspect of cycling is really great. It's really connecting you with the outdoors more, and you're getting some good cardiovascular exercise. You're getting some good. It's really, even though it's a repetitive movement, I do think it's low impact. I think it's good for your joints, depending on your age. It definitely helps with mobility, flexibility. It also helps with core strength, I believe. I really believe that cycling is really good for your core. I know that after we ride 36 miles, I can feel my core work that's happened throughout that day from, just holding yourself up and leaning and moving. all those things have massive health benefits. So, you know, from a training perspective, this is good for your body overall, particularly as you age, I believe. Yeah. It's good for balance. Oh, yeah. And then, you know, and then mental health. So, I don't know. It's a great way to get out and get some exercise, experience life and enjoy things. So I think it's just as you're training, just think about those things. Put the time in. I guess the most important things I think are just time. Put some time in.
And be kind of intentional about it too, you know.
Yeah.
Because, you know, any time in the saddles is going to be good for that purpose. But if you can, you know, engineer some different terrain, different times of day, different conditions. Just, you know, it may not seem fun, but if you've got some rain coming that's not thunderstorm, go out and ride in it. Because if you're on a tour, you're trying to get it across Texas, or not Texas, bad example. It's not raining a lot in Texas, but South Dakota or Missouri, you're going to be riding in some rain. So just convince yourself that you can do it and not be totally miserable. Yeah, that's actually worthwhile too.
Yeah, you need to experience a lot of the variables, you know, in your training. Yeah, and I guess that's kind of the point, is that figuring out. You know, how to make all those things work. Yeah. That's it. It's interesting when we talk about nutrition, and we'll wrap this up because I know we're at 40 something minutes maybe or so. But when you talk about nutrition too, you know, we have this tendency, if all you do is watch videos and read on forums, you'll see a lot of folks talk about taking food along and all this stuff. But I think one of the things that we've learned is that you can always find places to eat and get food. Yeah. I guess we should have included that in nutrition. You should take food along to have, because we did have places on the Natchez, for instance, where we didn't have any options. We're at the campground
Sunday night or whatever.
Yeah, so we wound up, you know, eating some ramen noodles or packaged meal or something, you know, on our camp stoves from our bikes. But there is a lot of food items and options out there. You're going to be stopping. You're going to be eating at different places. You know, you're just going to have a lot of opportunity for different food items. So don't feel like you got to pack the whole refrigerator, I guess.
Yeah. Just have a couple things that will get you out of trouble, like a couple little energy bars if you need it.
Yeah, for us, I think our go-tos, I enjoy the different types of bars, and you can pick anything that works for you. I do enjoy sometimes having along different nuts. Almonds, I like, you know, to carry almonds sometimes, things like that. I do carry sometimes, you know, when we talk about training, sometimes when you're out there, you need some hydration tablets of some sort. Electrolytes get trounced if it's, you know, you're chugging lots of water, you're sweating out a lot. I know there have been times where I felt like total junk, and figure out that if I drank something with electrolytes in it, suddenly I felt better for some reason. And I think that all is related. So as you're training, think about all those things. Think about time in the saddle, frequency of your training. You need to put some time in before you go on that tour, because ultimately what you want this to do is to be enjoyable. And you need to put some time in so that you can enjoy it. But inevitably, at some point, you just got to go. Get out there and go.
Put the Band-Aid, jump in.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Anything else? Anything to wrap it up?
I don't think so. No, I think we've covered some good stuff.
Well, thanks everybody for watching. If you, or listening, depending on if this podcast or YouTube, we had about 74 people or 76 people that watched the last podcast on YouTube. I know that one in particular. This is available on all the major podcast platforms, so you can download it as well if you want to listen on the go. Podcasts are a great thing to listen to while you train. Fair point to make. Oftentimes we listen to music, we listen to podcasts and all those things when we're riding. And so if you haven't liked or subscribed, please give that a try. Check us out on the podcast. If you leave a review on the podcast, that's really helpful, particularly if it's a positive review. But Apple, Google, all those places have places where you can leave a review, and that really does help our distribution and people finding us out there. So we certainly would appreciate that. Anyway, that's it for today. Talking about training. Get out there, ride your bike, do some training, and most importantly, go out there and take a tour. Get out there and do something.
You'll see something you haven't seen.
All right. See you again soon.